Wow, it didn't count down. Okay, so we're going to do the Wrenchman thing. I've got a new project in Unity, nothing special. Actually, it didn't prompt me to create a new project. I'll go ahead and do that just to be sure that I'm not in something weird. Okay, so I'm going to call this third person. Get my...
Are we gonna include images?
Yes.
Other than the hero controller?
Yeah, you might as well just pull that one in.
Just the character controller then?
Yeah, that's all you need. And I'll go ahead and save my scene, which I'll cleverly call part 1.
So then,
And let's give him a surface to run on. Let's put a light in there so we can see. And now let's bring our third person controller out. So last week we did the first person. This time we'll do the third person. There wasn't very much to first person controller, nor is there a great deal to the third person controller, which is why it's only going to take a few minutes. So we kind of did this in order. Last week we did first person, this week we're doing third person, the week before that we did 2D work. So I figure I'm getting all of the basics covered, which gives you about a month to work on your final game. So now you have all the basics, you can pick which one you want to use. And you can certainly use this character in your game if you want to. He has a great deal of limitation. He's very old. He's been around since, I think, Unity 2. And he doesn't necessarily play well with some of the newer constructs, so just bear that in mind. He doesn't really play well with nav meshes or anything like that because he's rather old. He wasn't created with those things in mind. Really, I just want to remind you how to set him up in case you do want to use him. So you click play, and there he is. So why is he running?
because he only does his animations.
We haven't had his animation set up yet. So that's what I want to remind you to do in case you didn't remember to do that. If you open up the third person controller, you should see, should be in here somewhere. I'm in the wrong place. Well, I may not be any better off. Where are his animations? I'll tell you what. Easy way to get to them. Just come over here. I'm usually looking for anim files. They must be buried in here somewhere. If you just come over here to the animations themselves and click that little target, that little circle dealy, it'll pop up a box and they'll be there. So that's pretty straightforward, idle to idle walk to walk. Run to run, and jump to jump. And now you're good to go. So now he's got his idle pose. There's a camera follow script that will follow him around. If you hold down shift, he'll run. And if you press spacebar, he'll jump. Pretty straightforward. So if you go down into his sources, you can see the scripts that are used to run these things. And they are in JavaScript. That tells you that, again, this is pretty old. They don't use JavaScript anymore. They use C# across the board. But in the beginning, everybody used JavaScript. So if you want to beg, borrow, and steal, you certainly can. And that's pretty much the extent of this guy. If you want to do anything more with him, you've pretty much seen his limitations. He doesn't shoot anything. That's not to say you can't make him shoot something. You could put an empty game object in front of him and use it as a spawn point for a projectile, but he doesn't have an animation for shooting, or I always envision him throwing that wrench at somebody.
Right.
So you could make him, you know, like throw a wrench, but he's not going to magically drop the wrench that he has. It's kind of glued onto him, so you can't really change that. Unless you want to take him into some, you know, some animation tool and break him up and do something to him. Which I guess you certainly could. Okay, I was just going to say you could come in here and put another cube in here, maybe make a nice platformer. And that used to be what we did in this class. We made a nice little platformer out of him, but I think you guys are a little more complex than the first class that came through, which is why I don't really do that exact exercise any longer. And then the other thing that we did was we brought in a really, really horrible ghost that I pulled off of, what's that site that I showed you before? I can't think of it right now. The 3D site.
TurboSquid?
Yeah, thank you. I pulled it off TurboSquid. It was ugly. It was free. It looked like Slimer out of Ghostbusters, and the normals were all goofy, and the axis was wrong, so he always ran sideways. But that was the one thing that I did show you how to do over there that I haven't shown you yet, and that's how to make something move with a lerp. I told you once upon a time that there are 3 ways. There's probably more than 3 ways as I think about it, but there's 3 main ways that you're going to see to move things in Unity. The first is to use the transform. The second is to use physics, say to affect a rigid body by adding force to it. And then the other way is to use the lerp functions, which is linear interpolation. It's a mouthful. So why don't I take a look at that real quick, just so I can be complete.
Like a side scroller?
Sure. I mean, it's just another way of moving things. It isn't any more or less. I wanted a sphere or a capsule or something different. Capsule's fine. So we make the capsule into a ghost, and I'll turn his capsule collider off so he can go through walls. I know, totally. Just in time for Halloween, right? So we'll add a script to him real quick. I'll just call it follow lerp.
You just place that on a capsule?
Yeah. And I'll totally cheat. I'll go to the one I wrote last year. If I was really cheating, I would have left it in JavaScript, right? So I could just copy and paste. The ghost that I used, the model, actually had, obviously, a face. This is just not going to cooperate, is it?
Of course not.
You must look at the startup screen, even if you don't want to. My point being, there is a function in here that we won't need, which is look at. You can certainly put it in there, and you should probably be aware of it. If you want your character to look at a certain position, a capsule doesn't have a defining face, so having it look at something is superfluous. What's going on here? Always a good time here at Richland College. Okay. So the code is pretty straightforward. You can have the transform look at a particular position. It's just a vector 3. So all this does is it gets the position of the player and then lerps the current position towards it. So let's give it a try. Let me make this bigger. There we go. That's a bit of a misnomer. I should just call it target, because now we're going to get the position. Whoops. Hey, it's going to be one of those nights, isn't it? Yeah, let's do that. Obviously, in my brain, I already had. That's better. Okay, so given its position, we'll use our transform position to get to wherever it's supposed to be. So it's a static method on vector 3. So vector 3 dot lerp. I forgot to put the position in. Is it transform dot? I think it's transform dot position. Yes. Is that right? Transform position. Oh, it must be an overload. Dang. Huh. I wonder if this will even work. This might be so old that it won't work. From to. Because the old one didn't have 2 things in it. Transform position, vector 3.lerp, transform position. Yeah, it did. Target position. Okay, I got you. Seems like you wouldn't need the first one, because you would just be moving from this to whatever. But that's okay. And then position is the target position, and we just throw a time.delta time in here. Is that right? Probably not. Probably don't need a method there. There we go. Let me look. Nope. Little d. That's the problem.
Hold on, what's the problem?
It was a little D. I had a big D. And I don't mean Dallas. Trust me, that was very funny. And I think that's it. That's it. That's all you need. So all the lerp is doing is it's moving from one place to another place.
And do we just assign the target to the tag?
I didn't. I did it directly in the script. So if we come back over here, assuming everything is okay, well, then we've got this lovely load failed thing going on over here. Always a good time. Second time's a charm. Okay. There we go. So the compiler finally woke up, and now we have the target, so now all you have to do is drag your guy and drop him in there. And now this thing ought to follow you around. And it do. And since I turned the collider off, then it acts like a ghost and can go through walls, and apparently you as well. And you'll notice it also has a few nice features, like it speeds up and slows down. It has an acceleration curve on it without you having to do anything to it. But the other neat takeaway from this little exercise is this little part of the script. You'll note I made it a transform instead of a game object. And yet I dragged a game object onto that script. So Unity is smart enough to know when you're talking about a piece of that game object, it will go ahead and cast it for you automatically. So target was a game object, you dropped it on there. I said, oh, you really want the transform, so it gives me the transform. It doesn't give me the game object. I don't have to go through and do game object dot. It saves me, what, like 10 characters. That's a lot. It's like an extra 15 seconds for you know, out of your day. That's pretty cool. Okay. So what if you want to make your own? That's next week. We're going to do a fully rigged robot next week. It's a little more complicated. But that's
Rig it ourselves?
I'm sorry?
Are we gonna rig it ourselves?
No. That's not this class.
We're just making our own.
We're taking a model that's we're taking one that's already rigged. There is an entire class just on rigging that you can take. I hear it's pretty good. So I wouldn't want to, you know, step on
That
toes.
would help us pretty much know how to make a first-person controller.
Right. A third-person controller.
Just move the camera.
Right. First-person controller is not much to it. Okay, part 1. It's done.